Okay, we ended in the last video talking about proofs for the existence of God with Thomas Aquinas and how Catholicism is really the fusion of Athens Greek thinking and Jerusalem Hebraic thinking, and how Thomas is really Aristotle plus Christ. Then I want to talk about what a proof is. What does it mean to prove the existence of God? But just in general, before I even get to that, some of the ways in which, Catholicism baptized Plato and Aristotle. For example, the idea of the forms in Plato. The Catholic philosopher Augustine said, forms are just ideas in the mind of God, or God is the good as the form of all forms, right? Thomas Aquinas takes Aristotle's proof of the existence of God in the metaphysics and in the physics. Aristotle actually believed in one God, so did Plato, and he proved it. He thought he did, at least in the metaphysics. Thomas Aquinas adapts that argument from Aristotle. Thomas also uses Aristotle's notion of eudaimonia and happiness that we talked about in the previous videos, virtue and these other things. So from very early on, the conceptual framework of Christianity was largely based on Plato and Aristotle. Anyway, but getting back to this idea of proof, what does it mean to prove something? Well, it seems to me there are basically, in the sort of modern vernacular, when you use the word proof, people tend to think you mean scientific proof or empirical proof or physical evidence. So, I don't know, does Lysol exist? I see it here. I've proved its existence. See, I've proved that this existing thing is Lysol, right? And the scientific proof really has to do with, conducting controlled experiments and seeing if the predictions of the experiment match the data of the experiment, right? So you empirically prove something, you can see it or observe it or manipulate it in science, right? That's what we can call an empirical proof. But that's just one of, I think, two other kinds of proofs. So there's, I think, three in general. Empirical proof, but there's also something called logical proof. There's proofs in logic. So you can actually prove something with logic. So you can say, for example, P, therefore Q. P, therefore Q. Or by modus ponens. Or, for example, modus tollens, as it's called. P, therefore Q, not Q, therefore not P. It's a logical proof, right? There's also, and this is, again, logic and logic is metaphysical, as well as the third one, mathematical proof. Mathematics uses proofs all the time. And mathematics, remember, is a metaphysical idea. You can't really see the number 2. You can't step into a pile of 5, right? It's something it's actually a schema that we see in reality, or we put on reality maybe. But it's actually, numbers really quantify relationships in a certain sense, okay? So anyway, when you think of proof, and when we talk about proofs for the existence of God, we're not talking about empirically proving God's existence. That would be absurd, since God is a metaphysical or meta-empirical entity, right? But when Thomas Aquinas talks about proofs for the existence of God, he's talking about logical proofs, okay? And the idea that you can only prove something with the empirical world or through empirical science is pretty much ridiculous. I mean, we have logical and mathematical proofs. So 2 of the 3 proofs are metaphysical proofs, okay? So when Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle in the history of the philosophical tradition, remember Thomas appropriated Aristotle, tries to prove the existence of God, he's going to do it logically, okay? Logically. So when we talk about proofs for the existence of God, we're talking about logical proofs for the existence of God. This may be also why they're not totally convincing to people. I find them convincing myself, but you can't empirically prove it. Empirical proof seems to be the standard of evidence, at least in the 21st century.